So details of the trade as we have them right now. Jimmy Butler's going to Golden State. The Heat are going to take Andrew Wiggins, and they're going to get PJ Tucker from Utah. And then they're also going to get a 2025 top 10 protected first round pick from Golden State. The Utah Jazz are going to take Dennis Schroeder, who's coming via Golden State. The Detroit Pistons are going to take Josh Richardson from Miami, Lindy Waters from Golden State, and a second round pick, as reported from, I think, your guy, Omari Sankofa.
Yep.
And then the Toronto Raptors are also going to get involved from Miami via Golden State and take Kyle Anderson here. So this is a 5-team deal. I mean, reporters to credit here. Anthony Slater and Sam Amick and Marcus Thompson, I think, were the first people to publicly say this was close. Shams reported it at some point. Omari got that detail. I think Jake Fisher might have gotten the Jazz detail. All these shout out to all of you. Right.
I mean, I'll shout out Omari as well. Like, he's trying to cover a Pistons game as we speak. Like, the Pistons are playing the Cavs down 2 in the third quarter, and he's trying to get like scoops on what draft pick, who from, that type of. So shout out all of these guys for what they're doing right now.
Oh my goodness. And then the second big piece of this that matters is that Jimmy Butler is now signing an extension where he will decline his player option for next season and sign a 2-year, $112-ish million contract. I would imagine that there's at least not going to be a player or a team option there, because if that's the case, then he's not really adding any value for himself, really. So, like, I would assume that that's just going to be like a straight 2-year extension. Okay. We have talked a lot about Jimmy Butler to the Warriors. I think that you and I have said, like, if it's not going to be Memphis, the place that makes the most sense is Golden State. Like, that's kind of where we threw our hat in immediately. You know, I've been kind of saying for a while that I didn't really think that Jimmy was going to find a way to Phoenix. And I thought it was either going to be like Milwaukee, Golden State, or he stays in Miami, honestly. When you see, let's just take the Golden State side of this first, since there are 45 other angles we could talk about. This just makes sense for Golden State. Like, they need to do something, or else we're going into like land where it's like a Jonathan Kuminga led Golden State team moving forward. Like, after Stephen Curry retires, they need a secondary creator. They need somebody like Jimmy Butler to be able to step up. This is an obvious move.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this going all the way back to the offseason, or coming into the season, where, you know, I thought this team and their depth were going to be able to win a lot of games in the regular season. That hasn't proven to be as true, but that they would have to make a move like this at the deadline to be real contenders. Now, does this actually make them contenders or not? I don't know. They're 1 game above 500 right now with, 30 games left, 32 games left, wherever we're at. And how quickly can they get Jimmy Butler in sync with Steph and Draymond and figure out the rest of the roster, as Andrew Wiggins was having a good season for the Golden State Warriors. So figuring all of that out will obviously be super important. But I mean, I understand people, these guys all in their mid-30s, and there's a real chance it goes south, right? There's a real chance it does not work. But I think you had to do something because Steph Curry is in his mid-30s and you only have 1 or 2 more chances. Also want to point out, all 3 of those guys, Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond, those contracts will all end the same year, depending on the exercise of player options and whatever. But Draymond has one in 26-27. Curry's contract ends in 26-27, and Jimmy's will be 26-27 as well, whether it's no options, club option, or player option.
And we're 6 minutes into the show, and apparently the Kyle Anderson to Toronto portion of this has fallen through, according to Shams. So we're now down to a 4-team deal. We'll see. Maybe there will be a resolution for Kyle Anderson. Okay. The Jimmy side of this for the Warriors, to me, just makes a ton of sense. Like, they need a pretty real creator on offense. They tried to kind of stopgap it with Dennis Schroeder. That just did not work out. Schroeder has been really, really bad for Golden State. There's not really another way to phrase it. He has not been nearly, good enough in the role to allow them to succeed. Also, Brandon Pajemski has not had a successful season. They needed somebody who, when Stephen Curry leaves the court, can take on more of an offensive load. And also, frankly, when Stephen Curry is on the court, can take on more of an offensive load. Curry this year has been interesting. I think he's generally been pretty good. I will say, though, that there are games where you do feel like he is not as involved as what we've seen previously in his career. He will have games where he will just be off of the ball a lot more often. It could be that the legs don't have it anymore because he's 35, 36 years old. It could be that, he feels like he needs to just take a little blow. There are so many different reasons why this could be the case. But I do think that having Jimmy Butler be able to take offensive, primary creative responsibilities with Steph on the court will allow Steph to be a more lethal offensive off-ball player, which we've seen him do successfully in the past. This is really what Golden State needed, in my opinion. They needed somebody who isn't just Dennis Schroeder level, primary creator. They needed a genuine, real, 1A, 1B option to be able to put next to Stephen Curry so that when Steph is able to go off the ball, or when Steph just has a night where he's just wiped, they have somebody else that can play, and also that can play and allow Steph to play off the ball more consistently and help him get to the playoffs at a little bit of a, higher level.
Well, and when we did our all NBA stuff, I had some people push back on Steph Curry being all NBA, but there's one thing that's undeniable. There's not many guys that have more gravity than Steph Curry. When Steph Curry is, especially off the ball, when Steph Curry is running off the screen, off the ball, when he's running around doing what he does, he attracts two guys a lot. And so now if you have the pressure of Jimmy Butler with the ball in his hands and Steph is running around off the ball, distracting or getting open or whatever, there's just a lot more things you can do, right? Jimmy's pressuring the paint. You have an off-ball action with Steph. Either guys are going to help and now Steph is going to be open, or guys aren't going to help because they're chasing Steph and Jimmy essentially gets to play one-on-one. So assuming health, assuming legs, Jimmy should be quite rested based on the amount of games he's had to play recently.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully he has some juice for the rest of the season. Again, I'm hard pressed to just be like, oh yeah, this makes them contenders when all of these guys are 35 years old, or in their mid 30s, I should say. But it makes sense. I do not blame the Warriors. And at the end of the day, what they traded Wiggins and the first are the real big assets here. I know Schroeder made a lot of sense when they made the move, but I think we always thought this was going to be the outcome for him anyway, because of when they traded for him, he was going to get moved again.
So, just a couple notes on the way that this deal goes down, right? So the reason that the Pistons are involved here is because the initial deal is a 3-team deal. If you just do Butler for Wiggins, Anderson, and Schroeder, it doesn't work via the CBA because I think they're both first apron teams, if I remember correctly. The if you just include Waters to Miami, it pushes Miami over the line. If you just include, if you try to include Josh Richardson on top of that with Lindy Waters, it pushes Golden State back over the line. So there had to be a third team involved here in order to be able to assess or to be able to make this work via the collective bargaining agreement, right? So the reason that the Pistons are here is because of that. Then after this, with Schroeder going to Utah, Toronto trying to figure out what it's going to do with Kyle Anderson, seemingly, that's where we start having little breakdowns. But I just want to be clear with people, this deal is not going to fall through. That's why the Pistons are here. It's because Jimmy Butler to Golden State is good. That piece of it is clean, as we're talking here live. The thing I want to just note for people, and we've talked about this previously when Jimmy originally like asked for his trade. People I think of like question like how much juice does Jimmy have left? Like what's going on here? In the 11 games before he got ill and then like sat out a few games and then also ended up in like this circumstance where he's frustrated about his contract and then, getting suspended and everything. In the 11 games before that, the Miami Heat went 8-3. He averaged 22 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, half a block versus only 1 turnover per game. Shot 60% from the field and drew 8 fouls a game and shot 81% on those shots. Like when Jimmy Butler decides to be engaged, Jimmy Butler is a stud still. Like he is an awesome, ridiculous basketball player, like a truly, truly awesome basketball player that is probably still one of the top 15 to 20 players in the league at this point. And we know what he can be whenever things get into the playoffs. This is a real two-way force that the Golden State Warriors are acquiring. They get not only what Andrew Wiggins does defensively, but they also get what they need offensively from a secondary primary creator on that end of the court, all tied into one player. And I think that that's the thing that like people miss a lot of the time. Whenever you have to piecemeal it in different ways, that's where things kind of break down. That's where things get really difficult to make work because you're trying to piecemeal one player being able to do this, one player doing that. It makes it really hard to create lineups that work together. The thing is that now that you have Jimmy Butler there all in one player, you can just say, okay, we can build a crazy number of different lineups now around Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler. That's the key here and why Jimmy Butler is such a sharp acquisition for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, because with him, this is the 9th rated defense in the NBA. I don't imagine it's going to go south with Jimmy Butler coming there. It may not improve because I think Andrew Wiggins, when we talk about Miami, we'll talk more about him. But I don't think it's not going to get negative, but this is the 20th offense in the NBA right now. And that's where you hope to see some real growth is by bringing in Jimmy Butler. And I know people don't want to hear this about a guy making $50 million or whatever he is, but when you're not happy, you're not happy. And if he's happy now because he got paid, I can't imagine there isn't some sort of excitement about playing with Steph Curry and the Warriors. Hopefully that engages Jimmy. It motivates Jimmy. And again, I'm not saying it should take that. I'm not saying he should have been unhappy where he was, whatever. I don't get into that stuff. But when a player changes scenery, we've seen it where it's worked to their benefit in terms of they're locked in, they're engaged. And as you say, when we see a locked in, engaged Jimmy Butler, it's pretty good. I am fascinated to see like the Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green dynamic because the intensity of both of those guys, the personalities, I think could be really good. But if you told me that they clashed in some way, I could see that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that will be fascinating also.
Yeah, it's a lot of strong personalities now in Golden State. And look, like, I think this is a sharp move for them. Let's get to a quick little note from Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action. There are over 10 million members. Like I said a second ago, they invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks always puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. We are big fans of Prize Picks here. We absolutely love the app and what they're doing for the daily fantasy sports scene. Download the app today and use code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use that code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. What it does is, depending on what they do with Jonathan Kuminga now moving forward in the offseason, and by the way, we should talk about that just for a second. This is a weird fit now with Butler, Kuminga, and Draymond. Now, Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, I think, are often quite underrated off-ball players, even though that neither of them are like super, super high-level shot makers or anything. Or Jimmy's a high-level shot maker, but I mean from the beyond the three-point line, right? They do move without the ball at an exceedingly high level and can really pass and process it quickly and maintain advantages quickly in a way that I think will really work in the Golden State offense. That's why I actually really love the Jimmy fit within the Golden State offense. He is willing to cut, move off the ball, make quick decisions, pass, play make. Like, just because he's not a big three-point shooter doesn't mean that he doesn't have gravity as an offensive player. I think that's a really, really important factor here. But I do worry a little bit about Kuminga's fit here. I would guess that the way teams operate is they just like pull a defender off of Kuminga and decide, hey, like, we're going to sit in the paint and we're going to stop Jimmy from getting to the line. Or getting to the paint. We're going to stop Draymond from like being able to short roll and like dump off to Trace Jackson Davis. Neither of their centers are shooters. Honestly, I do kind of like the idea now of them going to get Nikola Vucevic.
Sure.
If they could do Vucevic for like the Gary Payton II and Kevon Looney contracts, that's kind of an intriguing move now, in my opinion. But they do need like a little bit of space in order to make certain lineups work now from the center position. Vooch is probably like a 20 to 25 minute per game guy for them. But I think that there is space for something like that to kind of be the next step here.
I mean, they have been starting. My guy Quentin Post has got 3 starts here recently, and that's kind of his archetype. Obviously, Vooch much more established and all of that, like no question there. So, but just to your point of maybe that's what they're looking for with Post, they're getting those minutes. Yeah, Kuminga is so fascinating on this team. If I was Golden State, I would struggle with like wanting to give him up as well. But he also just doesn't seem like he fits. You know, I watched them play. I've brought it up before. There was a play where he drove middle, made the easiest read to the weak side you can imagine, and the shot was missed. And Kerr's over there like clapping up a storm. And I just read it as like Steve was so excited that Kuminga actually made the right read, the right pass. He just seems like such an isolation heavy player, but he's not so good at it that you just turn it over to him when you have these other guys, especially now with the Jimmy Butler on the team. So does it even make sense running the second unit, right? Because you're probably going to stagger Steph and Jimmy a little bit and let Jimmy just, do his thing with Steph on the bench at times. So it will be very interesting to see what his role continues to be for this team. As a talent, I understand why they haven't moved him, but just incorporating him in the rotation with different lineups and where he gets his shots is not easy necessarily.
Yeah, and just for the record here, in terms of like a deal structure that works for Vooch, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney, Guy Santos is a deal that works. The Bulls, it seems like they're gonna, potentially be in the market to move like a Zach Collins or a Trey Jones or a Kevin Huerter or something before the deadline tomorrow. Taylor Horton Tucker is still on this roster. Like, he could very easily be cut as well if they needed to do something there. Nikola Vucevic, the Warriors would have to like sign like 5 guys in the next couple of days if they decide to do a 3-for-1 deal with Vooch, which would be really, really tricky. But I mean, hey, you never know at this time of year. Maybe they're just going to be willing to do it.
Because they sent out, I mean, just for the numbers, they sent out 5 in this trade and only got 1 back as we understand it right now. So they are at a roster shortage, 4 open spots as we currently understand the structure of the deal.
Yeah. So look, Jimmy Butler gets what he wants. He doesn't get to Phoenix, but he gets the money. And frankly, I think gets to play in a situation that fits just as well. Next, you go to Miami. They get a first-round pick here. They get Andrew Wiggins, who based on the way he's played this season, is an asset. I think Wiggins works well, and now you're moving from Steve Kerr to Eric Spoelstra. I don't think you have to worry too much necessarily about like him really struggling to get shots or anything like that, or being created for. They have Bam Adebayo there. They have Tyler Hero there. I do think that there is a world where, like they could just as easily move Wiggins like in the offseason, maybe try and move him before the deadline here if you wanted to. But honestly, if I was them, I'd probably want to keep Wiggins for this year and then maybe look at it in the offseason and see where it goes. I would think that like you could just move him. I don't know how much asset value you would get, but I think you could just move him fairly easily.
I think if I'm Miami, because you're not trying to tank if you're Miami, right? You're trying to win as many games as you can still behind Bam, behind an all-star level season from Tyler Hero. I would just move Wiggins in there as a starter and see how many games we can win this year, because you get to this offseason and now he does only have 2 years left on his deal. And so, as you mentioned, maybe it's not a negative. He's had a good season. Andrew Wiggins is scoring 18 points on 44, 38, 78, 4.5 rebounds. Not a huge assist guy, but not a huge turnover guy either. I don't know that he's the defender he was at, during their title run, but he's not a negative defender by any means. Like, he's a good quality player. You add that to this Miami rotation, and it's interesting. Again, are they competing with Boston or New York or Cleveland? Probably not. I don't think so. But again, they're not going to go backwards the rest of the season. So you might as well put him in there, play, see if you can maybe raise the value, or maybe he really, really fits somehow and he's part of this rotation moving forward, whatever this next step ends up being for the Heat.
Yep, totally agree. The thing with Wiggins, though, is he does have 2 years after this one on his deal, which gets a little bit complicated because everything I know about Miami is that they would like to have space to be able to go and play in the free agency market of 2026.
True.
And getting Wiggins complicates that a little bit because Wiggins, Bam, and Hero would all be signed for that year. And they also have a number of young players that they would likely, prefer to retain during that time. Anything else with Miami? Like, they get off of this for a first round pick. Like, it feels like this was kind of where it was always ordained to go. I thought that if they were going to be able to do it a little bit earlier, they might have been able to get a second first round pick. But, end of the day, I'm not super surprised that it only ended up being one because of how Butler ended up kind of tanking all of this and like trying to get to Phoenix. And then, it ends up that we're 2 days before the deadline, less than 24 hours before the deadline.
Yeah.
And he's still on the Miami Heat. So you end up losing a bit of leverage there to be able to do what you want to do. This feels like a win just to kind of end it for the Heat.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it. I don't know. We've recorded a lot recently. One of the episodes we talked about how, like, does this end up being a deal where Miami just has to take 1 year rental or half a year rental price for Jimmy Butler? Obviously Golden State's not getting him for just a half a year rental because he signed the extension. This is still kind of what I would have expected if they were going to do that, though, where I'm probably a little higher on Andrew Wiggins than most people are. Like, I've come back around watching him this year, and maybe it's just because I really enjoy Wiggins bouncing back. I think he's going to be good there. I think he's going to really help that team. First round pick, we'll see, right? I mean, if this thing goes well for I don't know how far they could get in the West. There's no reason to do that till we see how everything else plays out tomorrow. So we think this is probably late teens, early 20s pick, late teens pick, probably.
Yeah, something like that. That's not terrible.
Yeah. So something there. And yeah, would you like more for Jimmy Butler? Sure. You bring up a good point with the 26-27 year on Wiggins deal. I still think you can probably move that if you need to when you want to get in that free agent market, especially if he comes there and continues to play the way he's been playing. So I don't think you hamstrung yourself too much there. It just was, this wasn't the same market as some other guys. He's 35 years old. He needed a new deal. He had been a pain through the whole process. 1 first-round pick and a solid rotation 3-and-D wing. You could do worse, even though it may seem underwhelming whenever you say Jimmy Butler got traded for that return.
Yeah, and look, like if they really truly wanted to get off of the Wiggins deal, like Memphis for Marcus Smart, like is probably there in the offseason. It's probably there right now. Like, you know, I'm not saying that they're talking. I'm saying that like that's a
Smart
deal that
only has one
across
deal
the board,
or 1 year left, right?
Smart only has 1 year left.
Yeah.
Wiggins has 2 years left after this. Like if they really truly just wanted to get off the money, I'm saying, like I'm not, you know, I think that would be there pretty easily.
Adding that kind of wing for Memphis, even though I'm the one that says they have plenty of wings all the time, but he's a good one. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, like Memphis might even give you a first-round pick to do that. Like I don't know.
I would not do that if I was Miami, but I understand if they just want to make sure they're ready. I would let Andrew Wiggins play out this season and just kind of see what it looks like, and then move him in the offseason or at next year's deadline, right? He's, half a season. He only has 1 year left. He's not an expiring, but that contract is very palatable if he continues to play the way he has been. And I see no reason why he won't in Miami with what they do down there. I think he could be a pretty valuable trade name at 12 months from now, I guess.
Right. And the only reason I bring that up is literally just to say that if the goal is cap space in the summer of 2026, I don't think they're going to have any problems moving Wiggins to be able to get that cap space if they truly want it. Okay. From YouTube user, Miami a playoff team or a play-in team now? I would say right on the edge. It depends on if Orlando kind of figures its shit out, in all honesty.
Yeah, like I don't listen. I watch the Pistons every night. I think they end up in the play-in. The other 5 teams are locked in. I do think it comes down to them and the Magic, and Orlando, needs to figure their stuff out because all of a sudden they got healthy and then they got worse. I don't understand. Not completely healthy, but 2 of their. Did we get a Lonzo Ball extension as well? Did this break?
Yeah, I want to run through the end of this thing.
Okay,
and then we'll talk about Lonzo in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Jazz get Dennis Schroeder. Have I seen a report that he's probably not going to play for them?
I've been trying to follow stuff on Twitter. I have not seen that.
Let's see here. Is Schroeder going to play for them? Let's see.
As you looked at you looked that up, the only thing I said to you before we started recording, they just have a lot of guards already in the mix there between Sexton, Clarkson, and then the 2 young guys in Collier and Keontae George. Now, do any of those guys get moved? And then now he makes more sense to have in the fold. It just seems like a tough spot to make sure your young guys get minutes, but also give these vets minutes, and adding him to the mix would seem to complicate that even more. You made an interesting point about just being better and more competent there. But that was my first thought, which is like, why would Utah necessarily want to get involved in this?
Yeah, no, I don't see anything about him. Maybe he does stay there then. But they get the 2nd round pick. They get a 2031 2nd round pick, and I think that's probably what they're looking for here.
Okay, so they got a pick to take him as well.
The Jazz get a 2nd round pick. And then the other piece of this is the Pistons, and this is tied with the Kenyon Martin Jr. deal earlier. They are taking Kenyon Martin into, either space or the room exception that they have.
Yeah.
Based off of this deal, I would guess that the way they structure this is they wait to have the Kenyon Martin deal happen until like right before the deadline. I'm sure it'll happen. And then they put this move into their cap space.
Yeah.
I would guess that that's the way it works. They could find different ways, but if they do it that way and they wait until like near the end and put Kenyon Martin Jr. into their cap space into their room exception, they can use their cap space up to a certain number, which would mean they still have something like $8 to $9 million to play with in cap space to be able to take on more money from other teams, more assets. They've already gotten 3 second round picks now for the ability to be able to do that. Bryce, you kind of mentioned to me what you're thinking in regard to this earlier.
Yeah, I just wonder if Trajan goes, okay, I've got 3 second round picks for free. Now I don't, and they already actually had a surplus of seconds, even though they were at a negative with first. I don't feel bad if I send 2 seconds plus a contract for insert player that helps our rotation for the rest of the year, right? I don't know who that is. Lonzo was actually a name that has come up a lot with Pistons fans. I know we'll talk about him here in just a little bit now because of what just happened with his contract, but it just would make sense. Like, hey, they literally have not sent out anything to get 3 second round picks. And so you don't feel bad if you send them out. I also think there's a world where like KJ could get aggregated if he goes into the cap space, which I think they could still do, right? Like they could they could take all 3 of these guys into the cap space, I believe, and still have the room. And then KJ could get aggregated with somebody else on the roster to hit money. Like they just have a lot of different avenues, I guess. Like I have yet to really comment or post or Substack about any of this until tomorrow afternoon because I have no idea which of these guys end up on the team and what ends up happening. And I just feel like I'm going to waste time if I do something and don't wait.
Yeah, they just have so many different options. Yeah. They just have so many different options at this point to be able to play around with, and we'll see where it goes from there.